Hey everyone, it's good to see you again. So last week I talked to everyone about perspective and how the Lord's Prayer very well could be a template, not just of how to pray, but to change our perspective. How it can help align us with God's perspective. Because remember, this is the God of the universe sharing perspective with us. And so we can use that as a template to change our perspective as well, to see things more the way God sees them. Today I want to continue along the theme of perspective, but I want to use two biblical examples of people and the story that they told themselves. Because I think the story that you tell yourself has a lot to do with the direction you're going. If you were to tell yourself a negative story, or if you were to tell yourself a story about how you were doomed to fail, or that you couldn't do it, or you're incapable, you're going to tend to believe that story, and it's going to affect your actions as well. So your thoughts lead to beliefs, which beliefs to action, which beliefs leads to how you identify, which leads to your actions, right? Which leads to thoughts, and it's this circle, and it keeps going around and around and around and around and around. So I want to talk to you about Abraham, and we talked about Abraham a little while ago, but Abraham made his home as a nomad, as a stranger, as a sojourner. He didn't know where he was going, and he lived in tents. So it's very possible that he could feel discouraged. So God called him into this journey. And then he starts taking some steps into it, and you or I might say at that point, God, where are you in this? I'm living in a tent. Things aren't going the way that you made them seem like they'd go. But Abraham didn't get discouraged like that. What he did instead was he was looking, it says this in Hebrews 11, he looked ahead to the foundation of the city that was going to be built, whose architect was God. So he was looking ahead. He was believing in the promise, and he was envisioning a future. He was telling himself the right kind of story. Now we can contrast that with the story of Gideon. Now, Gideon is in the book of Judges, and the common theme of the book of Judges is Israel's sins. They turn their backs on God, and then God allows another country to kind of like dominate them, and then they cry out, God rises up a judge, and it makes everything better. So this is where we're at in the story. They turn their backs on God. They are in this place of like desolation and destruction, and really a place without hope. So what's the first thing God does? I love this. He, in the story of Gideon, you can read this in Judges 6, is he calls a prophet to go there. And what does the prophet do? This is so cool. This really made me redefine what prophecy is. Because what I believe prophecy is it's a shift in perspective. God calls a prophet to help the people turn their perspective back to see things the way that he sees them. So what does the prophet do? He goes there and he reminds them. Come on. He reminds them of who they are, of what they've been through, and who brought them there. Most importantly, who brought them there? God brought them there. God provided for them. He brought them out of Egypt with a righteous right hand, with power, with authority, and he was not to be trifled with, and nobody could, when God decided to do something, nobody could stand in the way. The prophet comes, the prophetic voice has been and still is putting people back on God's agenda. Helping people to see things the way that God sees them, that God is strong, that God is mighty. So that's what the prophet does. Then this angel, a little later on, an angel comes to Gideon and says to him, mighty man of God. Again, this is the prophetic voice. This is him speaking into Gideon's life. This isn't how Gideon sees himself. The way that Gideon sees himself is, it says a little later on, the weakest in my tribe, and my tribe is the weakest. Like, he just thinks he is the lowest of the low, but that's not how God sees him. And that's not how God sees you either. This angel comes to him and gives him the voice, gives him the declaration of mighty man of God, mighty man of valor, however you want to see that. That's how God sees him. And the angel is helping him to see things the way that God sees them. This is powerful. This is extremely powerful. This is just as true for you. God doesn't see you the way you see you. This is my mandate. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm preaching all the time, is to help people understand that God sees them as awesome. He sees their potential. He knows what they can become. He created them. He didn't create them to be mediocre. He didn't create them to be devastated or crumpled down. God created you powerfully. That might not be where you see yourself now. That might not be where you are now, but that doesn't mean it's not your potential. It doesn't mean the joy isn't your potential. God sees you, and he sees the way he made you, and he knows it, and he knows he did it well. He did it well. And another thing I want to say is neither one of these situations is better or worse. Abraham had this amazing faith the whole time. He was looking forward. He had the vision God had given him, and he held on to faith big time. Gideon doubted. He doubted whether God was still doing the thing, whether God was still in the miracle business, whether God was still doing miraculous signs, and whether he could still work through people. That didn't stop God from using him. That didn't stop God from sending someone to encourage him. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't matter if you find yourself in a place of discouragement right now. God can still use you. God still wants to use you. And that doesn't have to be in big and mighty ways. It can just be in simple ways. It can just be in simple little acts of encouragement towards other people. It can just be in simple acts of obedience to whatever God's calling you to in that situation. I'm really encouraged by this, and I hope that you are as well, because God isn't done with you, and God loves you.